Hey there, it's Ben Hassel here, and here in this tutorial we're going to have a look at how we create this very cool type reveal effect in Final Cut Pro 10. Now, we're not using any extra plugins in Final Cut Pro 10. Everything that you see here is built into the default version of Final Cut Pro 10. It's going to teach you a lot about keyframing, about masking, and working with some of the different built-in plugins in Final Cut Pro to create some very cool effects. So if this kind of tutorial is something you're interested in and other tips and tricks about Final Cut Pro 10 or Apple Motion, then please do hit the subscribe button and the notifications button so that you get an update whenever I post a new video. And otherwise, let's dive into it and have a look at how to create this type effect in Final Cut Pro 10. So the first thing we're going to need is some video on our timeline. So we're going to jump into Final Cut Pro and grab this video clip that I've already pre-selected, and I'm going to drop this down to my timeline. Now once I've dropped it down, I want to see the entire video a bit bigger on screen, so I'm going to do Shift and tap the Z key so that I can see that entire clip, and I'm going to drop the audio right down for this. We don't need the audio for this particular clip, and you can trim down your clip or extend your clip as you need to, and you want around 5 to 10 seconds of clip so that you can stretch out your title. So once we have the clip on here, there's really three main steps to creating this. The first is to add our animated line in the middle. The second is to add our animated type. And the third is to work with masks to actually mask out that type so that it will float out from the middle. So the first thing we're going to do is actually add on the line which is going to appear in the middle of our clip here. And actually before we do that, we're just going to drop down the opacity of our clip. We want it in the background, but we want the type to be the main thing that is visible. So I'm going to jump to my generators up at the top left, where we can find our solids down at the bottom here, and we're going to go for the whites. So we'll drag on a white solid onto here, and I'm going to trim this down to the end of this clip. So I'm going to grab the blade tool, so just tapping B will grab the blade tool, and I'm going to delete that and then jump back to the select tool by tapping A. So you can see I'm just moving between the select tool A and the blade tool B to slice those clips up. So I can delete these clips that are beyond the end of my timeline here. So once I've got my white block here, we're going to use the crop tool to turn it into a line. So basically we have a clip that is 1920 by 1080. So if we come to the video properties for this, 1920 divided by 2 is 960. So basically I want to trim this down from the right to just before 960. So we want to have a few pixels, so 957 from the right and 957 from the left, or 958 will give us a nice kind of thin line down the middle. So we create a line just by cropping off that shape tool. And then we can do the top and bottom as well. So we'll just trim this down to the middle and from the bottom as well. And we're going to animate this later as well. You can animate your cropping so we can make this line appear out. We'll do that once we've got our type set up, because then we'll have the timing for everything perfect. So the next two elements we want to line up are our type elements. So we're going to come to our type generators up here, and we're coming to the bumper and opener, and we're just using the basic title. We can create quite a lot of cool stuff just from the very basic title. So I'm going to drag this onto my timeline, and again I'm just going to use the blade tool to slice it and then delete these other two clips. Now rather than setting up the type twice, I'm going to set the type that's aligning on the left hand side up first, and then we'll duplicate that layer and then move it to the right. So if we come to the type options up in the inspector, and we're going to be working a lot in the inspector. If you don't see the inspector up at the top right, then either just come to Window, Show in Workspace, and make sure the inspector is checked so that you can see everything. And if you're missing elements on my interface on your screen, then just go to Window, Workspaces, and check the default workspace. That's the workspace that I've begun to work with. So for my title, I'm going to stretch down my timeline just a little bit here so we can see the options down there. So I'm going to change the font. We're going to use Bodoni. So I'm going to scroll right up and we'll grab from the top here Bodoni 72, and then I'm going to align this to the right. So basically when I align it to the right, because this is the center point of that type, it's going to move across to the right. And because we're animating this, I'm not worried too much about the specific position of this right at this moment. What I do want to do is increase the size of my type, and increase the tracking a little bit, which will spread out my letters. And we're also going to make this all caps. Now the default all caps has a all caps with a small caps as well. We're going to change this so that all cap size is 100%. So everything is the same size for our title. So the words for this left hand element are going to be beach. And now if we scroll down, we can modify the X and Y position. So I can just pull out my X position just so it's away from that line. So I'm going to position my type in the type tool, but I'm going to do most of the animation using the position tool. So we'll see the difference between those two locations. So I'm going to make this -55, hit enter, and that's just going to mean that slips nicely away from this line in the middle. I'm also going to drop this down just a little bit on the y-axis, so -40. And you can type into these boxes as well if you want to copy the values that I have. So now that this is done, if I select this layer, this is in position as we want it to be. If we hold down the Alt key and drag up, we'll get a duplicate of that layer. So now for this next layer, which I have selected here, so make sure your next layer is outlined in yellow. I'm going to change this position to 55, so it will move to the right, and I'm also going to align it to the left, and we should have those perfectly spaced around that midpoint. So moving things around on the screen is possible. We can drag things, but we don't necessarily get that ability to line things up perfectly. So I'll often come to the position tools in the type options, so the little paragraph symbol up here, or in the video options, which we'll use in a second, for actually creating our animation. And the reason for that is that I can be pixel perfect in the positioning of things. So once we have our type positioned, we'll just change the words on the right hand side here. And we're going to have beach style as our two words. And I've chosen those two words because they're roughly the same size in terms of the rectangle you would draw around those letters. So we get this nice alignment to the center. So once that's done, I can come back to my video inspector up here, and we're actually going to disable one of these layers. So we're going to work on the animation for beach first, and then we'll copy those animation properties to the style on the right afterwards. So I'm going to just highlight this clip and tap the V key, which is going to disable that clip, and then select the layer below. So we haven't deleted this layer, we've just hidden it on our viewer here so that when we do the animation, we don't have overlapping text and stuff like that. So I'm going to come back to the beginning. And the way I always like to work with animation is that I'll look at where I'm finishing my animation, so where the text is laid out nicely, and then I'll time things back from that. So if I play this through, then my animation is going to finish somewhere in this area here. And I can speed it up and slow it down as we go through, but I probably want this to be a nice kind of short animation so the text feels like it's popping on. So I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to just increase my timeline a little bit. I'm going to right click and show my video animation. There's no video animation quite yet, but you can see we've got control over the transform properties, distortion, opacity, and all that kind of stuff. So it's at this point that I want to set my position keyframe. So I'm going to come to position here, up in my inspector, and hit the position keyframe. And now I'm going to come back in time. And basically, between this point and this point, I want this to slide to the left, and then we'll do the masking in a little bit to actually get that to appear as if it's sliding out. So for the moment, we're just modifying the X value here so that it just moves just a little bit beyond that line. Okay, so basically now we have an animation and it slides out from the left there. Just going to slow it down a little bit. Okay, so a nice animation, beach slides out from the left there. And now we'll go and apply the same animation to the right hand side. So I'm going to select this next layer and right click on it and enable it. So you can see V is the shortcut for enable. And I'm going to click the clip below and tap V to disable this clip, and we'll just switch these around. So I'm going to show the video animation for my top layer now. And I'm just looking at the timing of this. So I want beach to come on first, it's the first word. To the left, Hang on a sec, before I disable it, I need to play this back, so I'm just going to re-enable this. So I'm going to play this back now. So we've got beach coming on from the left, and partway through that beach animation is where we want style to start drawing on. So just as this is dipping out for the last moment, we'll have style starting to flow out. So this is our first keyframe. So if I select here, then basically I want my first keyframe for position to be here. So I'm going to set that, and then I'm going to time the end of that animation. So set the keyframe for the last point. So now I'm going to play this through. Okay, so we'll just play this through from the beginning. So we've got beach and then style, and probably somewhere around about here is where we want it to end. And we can move these keyframes around later to get it right. So I'm going to add a keyframe for position up here. And what's important here is that when we've created keyframes, we want to make sure that we snap to a specific keyframe to make an adjustment. So you can see when I'm on my first little diamond on the timeline here, I can see this is highlighted yellow up in the video inspector. So now I know that when I modify the X position, I'm not making an extra keyframe in here. So I'm going to drag this back to the left. Okay. And so now if I disable the clip below, we have style animating out. And if we enable the layer below, then we have beach moving to the left and style moving to the right. And now we need to add our masking so that they're hidden behind this line. So in Final Cut Pro, basically the way that we're going to do this is we're going to turn these into a nested clip or a compound clip. So we want to make sure we've got the timing of our animation roughly right. We can modify this afterwards, and I'm pretty happy with that. But if you wanted to speed things up or slow things down, you can right click, go to show video animation, and then just move these around. So if you want to slow down something, move the keyframes further apart, or move them close together if you want things to speed up, or change the point at which the animation starts. We can just drag these around. So I'm going to hide that now. So now I want to nest these. So first of all, I'm going to nest the left-hand text, so the beach. So I'm going to right-click there and go to New Compound Clip. And basically this is going to lock all that animation into a clip. So I'm going to call this left text. And once that's done, the rest is pretty simple. So I'm going to play that through, and I'll disable this top layer. So basically I want to create a mask around this area, or the left hand side, so we can create a mask either way, and then basically beach will kind of flow out from that. So I'm going to come to my effects on the right hand side, and under video you want to go down to your masks, and we're going to use the shape mask. So the shape mask by default has a lot of feathering on the edge of it, so you can see as we move across to the end of it here, there's a little bit of feathering on this mask, and we want to take that feathering off. So I'm going to actually make this completely square by moving this white hand dot on the top left, and then in the inspector up at the top right you'll see your shape mask options, and we can change the feather to 0 because we basically want it to pop out from nowhere. So once this is done, I'm going to position this across to the left and just line up the mask with the line. So if we play that through now, we're now revealing the type. So we just need to do the same for the other one. So if we turn on the topmost layer, we have our beach coming out, and we just need to change this into a compound clip. So Option and G is the option to change it into a compound clip, and I'm going to call this right hand type. And now once that's done, I can really be anywhere in my timeline here. I'm going to add the shape mask, or if I don't want to add the shape mask and actually go in and change the settings, I can copy my shape mask from here. So copy the clip, edit copy or Command and C, and then click the clip and then go to edit and paste attributes, or Shift Command V, and that will allow me to paste the shape mask there. And then for this, all I'll need to do is move that shape mask across to the right hand side, And you can see this at the point we're at starting to come together, where now if we come back to the beginning and play this through, we have our type appearing. So it's that compound clip or nested clip that allows us to mask something that's already been animated, so we can make it appear from nowhere. And then for the next step, we're going to actually modify this. So this is going to come out, and what I want to do is when the first piece of type comes out, I want my line to appear. So basically I'm going to select my white shape at the background here, come to my crop tools. So some point here I think the line will be at its kind of maximum, so I'm going to add a keyframe for my top and bottom crop, and once that's set up I can go back in time, and now I can take the cropping all the way up to, so for this particular example, half of 1080 is 540. So basically I want these each to be 540. We can type that in, and then our line will disappear in the middle here. So now you can see the line grows out and then the text appears. So what I want though is for the line to be to be here once the text is actually starting to pop out. So you can see as beach starts to pop out, I want that line to be a bit taller. So around about here, if I right click and show the video animation, at this point when the text starts to pop out, I need to move these options back a bit so my line is actually bigger when the text starts to draw out. So that's about right. I can also use the transform tool to just reposition this slightly so it's a bit more centered on that type. So I can just drag this up and it will snap to the middle. So let's play this back. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. At any point in time we want to, we can always double click into any one of these compound clips of the left hand text, and we can right click and go to show video animation, and we can speed things up or slow them down here. So if I want my clip to be animating a bit slower on the left hand side, I can drag these further apart, and then when I come back that left hand animation will be a bit slower. And also as this is drawing out, just gonna have a look here. So there's a couple things happening. So I've got a little shadow of my type in there because the masking is there at the beginning. So I'm actually gonna just trim these back to the beginning. So there's nothing in the middle of the screen. I had a little bit of a shadow of this type that was hanging there. And now you can see we're starting to get close to having that timing nice and perfect. Okay, actually I might pull this back just a little bit more. Yeah, that's nice. So basically the line draws on and then the type pops out. And actually my style is just a little bit too slow. I want it to pop a little more, so I'm going to come in here, right click, show my video animation, and then just speed this up a little bit. Nice. So you can work on the timing, you can modify that, and this is a great way of creating titles and getting complete control over your titles. If you don't want to go into animating in something like Apple Motion, or you don't have Apple Motion, this will allow you to create some of those effects that you may have seen in some of the plugins. There's no plugins needed for this. Everything that we're compositing is possible to create in Final Cut Pro 10. One last tip that I would share with you is I just drop down the opacity of this background clip. But actually normally what I will do rather than doing the opacity is I'll come up to the color inspector and I will work with the exposure and just increase the blacks, drop down the whites, and just kind of neutralize that image a little bit so that things show up, but so that it's not just a black transparent image behind there. So we get a kind of nicer muted style behind that text that's popping up. We can also, if we want to, and this I use from time to time as well, is from the color menu here. We can add a colorize effect, which will allow you to give your background a specific style. So if we come up to our video inspector up here, we're mapping the black and white to different colors here. So again, we can stylize our background nicely there. So we can give it a kind of cool blue beach effect. Okay, so it's looking pretty nice. We could also animate out as well. So if we want to come here, the mask is still in effect. So if we want this to slide on, hold, we can then double click in here, and one clip at a time we can go into the video animation, add a new keyframe so that we get a hold there for the position. And then once that's done, if we slide a little to the right, we can change the X position, and now, because the mask is still in play, we'll basically have that slide on and then snap away, and we can work with the timing on that as well. So if I double click in here, I can do the same at the end here. Right click, show my video animation, add a position keyframe first of all, so it's holding between those two keyframes, come to the end, and then drag this time to the left so that it disappears back behind that mask. So now we'll have, probably slightly badly timed. Okay, so we can work on that, so we can have a look at where we'd like it to finish. So my beach has almost disappeared there. If I double click on style, it's going to bring my playhead to the same frame. So that's how I can get my timing right. And now I can just move this back so that my beach and style kind of whip away in the same moment. So if we go back now, we'll come back. Okay, and we're almost there. So basically, style is moving a bit sooner now. So I might come back to my beach shot, double click in there, show my video animation, and then just move this back a notch or two so they're both starting to animate at the same time. Okay, nice. So basically we have that disappearing. We could come in here and add a quick dissolve on our line. So these are going to disappear nice and quickly. So I just used Command and T to add a transition so we can quickly remove that line without any complicated animation. So once that's disappeared, I'll get this line to just fade out. Nice. So that's how to create an animation like this in Final Cut Pro without any external plugins. Please do hit the like button and subscribe button and all that stuff. I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and please do let me know if you have any questions about Final Cut Pro 10, about Apple Motion. And if Apple Motion is something you're interested in, then these kinds of text animations are something that's really easy to create in Apple Motion, where we can then modify those settings. So I'm going to be doing some more Apple Motion tutorials, so keep an eye out for those by subscribing and hitting the notifications button. And I look forward to seeing you on future tutorials.